I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Today, we are holding our third hearing in the committee's investigation into the fossil fuel industry's decades-long climate disinformation and greenwashing campaigns. At our first hearing last October, big oil executives admitted for the very first time to Congress that climate change is real and that burning fossil fuels is a primary cause and that this is an existential threat to our planet. But these executives refused to commit to real changes to keep warming within acceptable levels. Instead, they repeated their company's misleading climate pledges and described their, quote, aspiration, end quote, to reduce emissions decades in the future. In February, we held a second hearing. We brought in climate experts and investors to evaluate these pledges. Their testimony was clear. Not only are big oil's climate pledges misleading and insufficient to curb warming, but none of the companies is even on track to meet these pledges. Not a single one is going to meet the pledges or are on track to do so. Since that hearing and following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the fossil fuel industry has reaped record profits while people around the world paid more at the pump. Exxon made $17.9 billion in their most recent quarter, and it's the largest ever quarterly profit. And BP recently posted its highest quarterly profit in 14 years. And we see these astonishing numbers here. $8.5 billion. Chevron, $11.6 billion. Shell, $11.5 billion. Exxon, the largest quarter ever, at $17 billion. But these companies use this windfall profit to enrich investors and boost salaries of top executives. Their clean energy investments, however, were a drop in the bucket. Today, our committee is releasing new documents from our investigation that shed light on how the fossil fuel industry misled the public about their climate goals, their actions, and their investments. For example, documents show that even as Shell Oil promoted an economy-wide path to net zero emissions, an employee admitted in private that this scenario had, quote, absolutely nothing to do with our business plans, end quote. And while BP touted carbon capture as key to its transition to cleaner fuel, the company privately hoped this approach would, quote, enable the full use of fossil fuels across the energy transition and beyond, end quote. We also found that Exxon spent nearly $70 million to advertise its research in algae-based biofuels. But company documents reveal that technology is, quote, still decades away from the scale we need. We probably won't see it, end quote. We probably won't see it in our lifetime, and yet they were promoting it. And the documents show that both Exxon and Chevron fought hard to avoid making any real commitments to advocate for the policies they claimed to support. That's why I love documents. Documents don't lie. Put simply, these documents show that big oil is still not taking its responsibility to curb emissions seriously. And while the fossil fuel industry fiddles, our planet is burning. This summer, we have seen extreme weather that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Heat waves and drought are drying up entire rivers in the American West. Record floods are devastating communities in Kentucky, Missouri, and Texas. As climate change intensifies, These disasters will become more frequent, more expensive, and more deadly. Today, we will hear from survivors of extreme weather from across the country. These men and women have suffered heartbreak and devastating loss, and they are joining us today to urge the fossil fuel industry to finally take real action to address its central role in the climate crisis. We will also hear today from experts who will speak to the harm that burning fossil fuels has inflicted on our economy and our communities, even as it fattens the pockets of big oil executives. Finally, we invited board members from Exxon, Chevron, Shell, and BP to testify today. We wanted them to answer for the record profits their companies are raking in while fleecing consumers at the pump and refusing to take meaningful action on climate change. Unfortunately, none of these fossil fuel directors bothered to show up. These four companies have also taken other steps to obstruct this committee's investigation. After I issued subpoenas last November, the companies withheld documents at the heart of our investigation, including from their boards of directors, while flooding the committee with thousands of press clippings and other materials. Today, I am renewing my call for these companies to comply with these subpoenas. I want to be clear that our investigation goes on and that we will not stop until the American people get the truth about the fossil fuel industry's role in our climate crisis. Before I close, I want to briefly address claims that we should not be pressing big oil to clean up its act because this will raise energy costs on consumers. The truth is that Americans are suffering from high energy costs in large part because of big oil, which is making record profits, the highest they've ever made, while charging high prices at the pump. Fossil fuel companies could lower prices. They could lower them dramatically and still have billions left over to invest in transition to a cleaner and ultimately cheaper fuels. Unlike the oil companies, Democrats in Congress are taking action. President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, which we passed last month, provides nearly $370 billion to cut emissions, promote clean energy, advance environmental justice. And this law is estimated to cut in energy costs for the average American family by $500 a year. So Democrats are showing it can be done. We can bring down inflation, reduce energy costs for Americans, and solve the climate crisis. Big oil needs to do its part. They must end their greenwashing and finally take climate change seriously before more Americans and communities are harmed. I now invite my distinguished colleague, Ranking Member Comer, to give an opening statement, and again, publicly thank him for attending the ceremony for our late distinguished chair of this committee, Elijah Cummings. Your